1945. The world's deadliest conflict is drawing to a close, but in the dense, suffocating jungle of Burma, the fighting is at its most brutal. It is a war waged with machetes, trenches, and the grim, desperate refusal of surrender. In this savage theater, armies were pushed beyond the limits of human endurance. But on a single night in May, an ordinary soldier would perform an act so far beyond those limits, it became legendary. An act of insane, singular heroism that would change the definition of courage. His name was Lachhiman Gurung, a Nepalese soldier of the British Indian Army's 4th Battalion, 8th Gurkha Rifles. The facts of his defense are almost unbelievable. Lachhiman Gurung held his position single-handedly against an onslaught of at least 200 Japanese soldiers. But the manner in which he did it is the key to his legend. During the attack, a Japanese grenade landed in his trench. He threw back the first grenade. A second fell, he threw that back too. Then came a third. He attempted to throw it back. It exploded in his right hand, blowing off his fingers, shattering his arm, and severely wounding him in the face, body, and right leg. The man was bleeding, mutilated, and isolated. His 2 comrades were also badly wounded. And he had 4 hours of hell yet to survive. Not only did he hold his line, but with his left hand alone, this one-handed soldier stopped the Japanese advance. Of the 87 enemy dead counted in the immediate vicinity, 31 lay directly in front of his position, personally killed by Rifleman Gurung before dawn broke. This is the story of Rifleman Lachhiman Gurung, the man who was too tough to die and too brave to retreat. This is the story of how a small, shattered outpost became the grave of dozens of Japanese soldiers. To understand the act, we must first understand the man and the warrior caste he came from. Lachhiman Gurung was a Gurkha, a name that, for over 200 years, has been synonymous with unflinching loyalty and ferocious courage. Hailing from the rugged mountains of Nepal, the Gurkhas were first encountered by the British in the early 19th century. After 2 brutal wars, the British were so impressed by the tenacity of these small, hardy fighters that they began recruiting them. The Gurkhas quickly became, and remain, one of the most elite fighting forces in the world. Their motto is simple, and it speaks volumes: it is better to die than be a coward. Central to the Gurkha identity is the kukuri, their distinctive, inwardly curved knife. It is more than a weapon, it is an extension of the man himself, a symbol of their bond to the earth and their willingness to close the distance on any enemy. It is often said that once a kukuri is drawn in anger, it must taste blood before it is sheathed. In 1945, the Gurkhas were fighting for the British crown as part of the massive effort to push the Japanese out of Burma. This was a conflict of extremes. The heat, the humidity, the disease, and the fanatical resistance of the Japanese all combined to create an environment that crushed the will of all but the hardest men. Lachhiman Gurung was one of those men. Born on December 30, 1917 in the village of Dahakani in the Chitwan district of Nepal, he was quiet, resolute, and drawn from a culture that prized duty above all else. He was a perfect soldier, but even among the Gurkhas, his destiny would be unique. He enlisted in December 1940, and he was fortunate to be recruited. Standing just under 4 feet 11 inches tall, he was below the minimum peacetime height requirement. But this was wartime, and exceptions were made for men of courage. After completing his recruit training, Gurung was posted to the 4th Battalion, 8th Gurkha Rifles, a regiment with a storied history of service. And in the spring of 1945, his battalion found themselves deep inside Japanese-held territory, part of the 89th Indian Infantry Brigade of the 7th Indian Infantry Division, tasked with holding a vital position near the village of Taungdaw, Burma. By May of 1945, the Japanese Empire was collapsing, but its soldiers in Burma were fighting with a chilling desperation. They had been cut off, surrounded, and ordered to fight to the last man. They had nothing left to lose, and that made them terrifying opponents. At the end of April, the 89th Indian Infantry Brigade, under General Sir William Slim, was ordered to cross the Irrawaddy River and destroy enemy forces north of the Promtongup Road. By May 9, the Japanese, after a series of desperate attacks, had broken off contact and were withdrawing toward the Taungdaw Valley. B and C companies of the 4th Battalion, 8th Gurkha Rifles were positioned to block their route at the village of Taungdaw, on the west bank of the Irrawaddy River. When the Japanese arrived, the 2 Gurkha companies were surrounded, their lines of communication cut. The key position was held by No. 9 Platoon of C Company, positioned almost 100 yards ahead of the remainder of the company. And the most forward post of that platoon was manned by Rifleman Lachhiman Gurung's section. On the night of May 12, the Japanese launched a massive counterattack intended to shatter the British line and break through the Gurkha position. The target was critical. If they could overrun Gurung's position, the entire reverse slope position would be dominated and turned. At 1:20 a.m., under the cover of darkness, a Japanese force numbering at least 200 men crept toward the Gurkha position. This post dominated a jungle path leading up into the platoon locality. The outpost was manned by only a handful of Gurkhas. Their job was simple: stop the enemy or die trying. The attack began with infiltration. Stealthy figures emerged from the jungle. But the Gurkhas were masters of jungle warfare. They heard them. Suddenly the night exploded. The Gurkhas unleashed a devastating burst of fire from their rifles and machine guns. The initial wave of Japanese troops was cut down. This was not a skirmish. This was a full-scale, brutal assault, and the tiny Gurkha position was its focal point. Lachhiman Gurung was manning the forwardmost trench. From his isolated position, he could see the shadows shifting, hear the shouted commands, and smell the burning sulfur of the enemy explosives. He fired his rifle until it was too hot to hold. He reloaded, then fired again. He was fighting for his life, for his comrades, and for the honor of his regiment. The Japanese, realizing they could not simply overrun the post with manpower, began using grenades. Before assaulting, the enemy hurled innumerable grenades at the position from close range. Volley after volley of fragmentation explosives rained down on the narrow trenches. One grenade fell on the lip of Gurung's trench. Without hesitation he grasped it and hurled it back at the enemy. Almost immediately, another grenade fell directly inside the trench. Again he threw it back. The Japanese were persistent. They knew he was the main obstacle. Then disaster. A third grenade landed in his trench, rolling just outside his reach. In that split second of blinding panic and pure instinct, Lachhiman Gurung thrust out his right hand, grasping the grenade in a desperate attempt to hurl it back over the parapet. He was too late. The explosion was deafening. The blast tore through his hand and forearm, blowing off his fingers and shattering the bone. The force of the explosion flung shrapnel into his face, body, and right leg. His right eye was severely wounded. He lay there, stunned, wounded, and bleeding profusely. His entire right side was devastated. His two comrades in the trench were also badly wounded. The Japanese saw their chance. They heard the blast, the scream, and the subsequent silence. Screaming and shouting, they formed up shoulder to shoulder and attempted to rush the position by sheer weight of numbers, believing the Gurkhas had been neutralized. What they found was not a dead man, but a man who had been transformed into something far more dangerous. The agonizing shock gave way not to retreat but to rage. Lachhiman Gurung did not panic. He did not cry out for help. He did not surrender. He was now alone at his post. He shifted his rifle, a bolt-action weapon designed for right-handed use, onto his left shoulder. With his remaining usable left hand he somehow managed to operate the trigger, the bolt, and the magazine. The Japanese poured forward, expecting a clear run. They were met with a relentless, controlled stream of fire. As Japanese soldiers advanced, Gurung fired, reloaded, and fired again. The rifle was almost impossible to manipulate with one hand, but he managed, working the bolt-action mechanism. Reloading. Closing the bolt. Firing. He held his nerve. He held his position. "Come and fight a Gurkha," he yelled into the darkness. He was surrounded by the noise of the fighting, the screams of his wounded comrades, and the smell of his own lifeblood soaking the earth. But he focused. Every click of the bolt, every press of the trigger was a conscious act of defiance. Wave after wave of fanatical attacks were thrown in by the enemy. All were repulsed with heavy casualties. The Japanese tried a second time, a third, and a fourth. They tried to outflank him, to crawl under the wire, to rush his trench. But Gurung tracked them, wounded and half-blind, his one good hand working his rifle with the speed and precision of a man possessed. He kept shouting his defiance into the darkness. A torrent of Gurkhali curses and challenges that let the enemy know the position was still held. For 4 agonizing hours, from the moment the grenade exploded until the first rays of tropical dawn, Lachhiman Gurung maintained his single-handed defense. Regardless of his wounds, he waited with perfect calm for each attack, which he met with fire at point-blank range from his rifle. He was determined not to give 1 inch of ground. The Japanese simply could not advance. This one man was the wall they could not breach. The sight of their comrades being cut down by a single source of fire began to break the morale of the attackers. They had faced Gurkhas before, but never a single man who seemed utterly immune to pain, fear, and mutilation. As the sun began to rise, the surviving Japanese retreated, baffled and broken, leaving a field littered with their dead. The 4th Battalion, 8th Gurkhas held out, surrounded and cut off, for 3 days and 2 nights. They held and smashed every attack. When relief finally came on May 15 and his comrades reached his trench, they found Lachhiman Gurung slumped against the wall, his helmet askew, his uniform soaked in blood, his right arm a mangled ruin. His rifle was smoking hot. And scattered across the ground in front of his position were the bodies of the enemy. Of the 87 Japanese dead counted in the immediate vicinity of the company locality, 31 lay in front of Rifleman Lachhiman Gurung's section, the key to the whole position. 31 men personally accounted for by a man who had fought a 4-hour battle with one hand. Had the enemy succeeded in overrunning and occupying his trench, the whole of the reverse slope position would have been completely dominated and turned. Lachhiman Gurung had multiple severe wounds, but he was alive. He was immediately evacuated to hospital. He had paid a terrible price. He lost the use of his right hand and his right eye. But his actions had saved the lives of his fellow soldiers, stabilized the line, and broken the spirit of the Japanese advance. He had shown the world what one man could do when driven by duty and courage. The recommendation for the Victoria Cross, the highest and most prestigious award for gallantry in the face of the enemy that can be awarded to British and Commonwealth forces, was immediate and unanimous. On December 19, 1945, at the Red Fort in Delhi, His Excellency the Viceroy of India, Field Marshal Lord Wavell, personally pinned the Victoria Cross ribbon to the tunic of Rifleman Lachhiman Gurung. His official citation read, "This rifleman, by his magnificent example, so inspired his comrades to resist the enemy to the last that, although surrounded and cut off for 3 days and 2 nights, they held and smashed every attack. His outstanding gallantry and extreme devotion to duty, in the face of almost overwhelming odds, were the main factors in the defeat of the enemy." His proud father, Partaman Gurung, then about 74 years old and very frail, was carried for 11 days from his village in Nepal to be present at the Red Fort to witness his son being decorated. It was a journey of love and pride that few fathers have had to endure. Lachhiman Gurung was a hero of the highest order. He continued to serve with the 8th Gurkha Rifles, which was redesignated the 8th Gurkha Rifles after Indian independence in 1947. He was promoted to Havildar, the equivalent of sergeant, and retired the same year. Like many Gurkhas, he returned to a simple life in Nepal, where he married twice and raised 5 children. He farmed a small plot of land and owned several buffalo, oxen, goats and cows. But his story was far from over. For the rest of his life, Lachhiman Gurung advocated for Gurkha veterans, fighting for their right to settle in Britain. In 2008, after a successful legal campaign led by the actress Joanna Lumley, the diminutive figure of Gurung, always wearing his row of medals with the Victoria Cross and pride of place, was granted the right to settle in the United Kingdom. He moved to Hounslow, where he was looked after by his granddaughter Amrita. He was made a freeman of the borough of Hounslow, a fitting honor for a man who had given so much. On November 19, 2010, suffering from pneumonia, he was admitted to Charing Cross Hospital. He passed away on December 12, 2010 at the age of 92, surrounded by his second wife, Manmaya, and his 5 children. His funeral was held on December 22, 2010, at Hounslow Civic Centre. His Victoria Cross medal remains in India, in the possession of his parent unit, the 4th Battalion, 8th Gurkha Rifles, as an inspiration for young servicemen. But his story lives on. It is an enduring testament to the ferocity of the Gurkha spirit. It reminds us that courage is not the absence of fear, but the refusal to yield to it, even when fate has delivered a crushing, life-altering blow. "I felt I was going to die anyway," Gurung once said, "so I might as well die standing on my feet. All I knew was that I had to go on and hold them back." Lachhiman Gurung went into that trench a good soldier. He emerged from it a legend. The man who, with a shattered hand and a single rifle, held the line against 200, and proved that a fighting heart and a left hand were all he needed to stop an army. Thank you for watching. If you found the story of Lachhiman Gurung awe-inspiring, please like this video and share it with others. History's unsung heroes are often the ones history overlooked. Let's make sure their legacy is finally seen. In the comments, let us know, what other forgotten heroes should we cover? And don't forget to like and subscribe for more deep dive historical documentaries.